Thank you very much for being on the programme. You're obviously a Conservative, but I feel like you're someone who's perhaps as kind of doggedly party political as some of your colleagues. So I'm very interested to get your assessment on what we've seen this week with regards to the cost of government borrowing, the value of the pound. Like, how worried do you think we should be?
Well, look, I think it is concerning, and it's not just the last week. This is actually the culmination of the last month or so, where the UK has got caught up in a global storm. And what has happened is that markets are looking at the US economy in particular, but also all around the world. They're more worried than they were a few months ago that inflation is maybe not beaten, maybe inflation's coming back, maybe Donald Trump with tax cuts and tariffs is going to reignite it again. And so we've seen the interest rates on government debt all around the world going up. And the problem the UK has is that it's a bit like a beauty contest. At the moment, the UK is looking like the ugliest contestant in the beauty contest because we've got low growth, quite persistent inflation, and in particular, very high government borrowing after the budget. And that is making markets say, well, hang on, you're going to be issuing a lot of debt, borrowing in the markets, and we're not willing to buy that debt. And what that does is it pushes up the interest rates. And just in the last few days, we've also seen the pound falling at the same time, and that's not a great sign.
So it's a combination of international factors over which the government's got no control, and then some specific factors about the UK.
The UK has made itself quite vulnerable to this global storm because we're borrowing so much money and because growth in the economy at the same time is so anemic.
Now, if Rachel Reeves is going to stick to her fiscal rules, which she says she will, she needs to now look at spending cuts or tax rises. I mean, what do you think she should do?
Well, what I think she should do is get on top of this problem, because I think this is the new environment we're in. Basically, we have an economic strategy that has been born in the last decade where a lot of economists in the Labour Party and around the Labour Party said we should be borrowing a lot more. And that was in a decade where interest rates were effectively zero. The problem is interest rates are now not zero, they're 5% and rising, and that strategy doesn't make so much sense. And that is going to be the environment we're in now for the time being. And so I would get on top of it now. I think she should bring forward things that she could do to show she's getting on top of spending. They are committed, for example, to cutting the welfare bill with some of the measures the previous government passed on to them. Get on and do that. Demonstrate that you can cut spending.
So you're talking about spending cuts, basically. That's what you think?
Well, I think that would be more credible. What I think we probably will get is in March, the Office of Budget Responsibility has to do new forecasts, which will show, I think, that the headroom, the very small amount of headroom that the Chancellor gave herself in the budget has probably been eroded. She's probably going to look like she's missing her fiscal rules. And the easy political option is to say, in 4 or 5 years' time, we're going to just slightly reduce the amount we're planning to spend. So she might have to trim the envelope for her spending review. But if it's in 4 or 5 years' time, that defers the difficult decisions. Markets will probably accept that up to a point, but it's not really getting on top of the problem.
I mean, some people listening to you might be like, look, you're the guy who was George Osborne's right-hand man throughout austerity. So you are kind of Mr. Spending Cut in a way. And yet, for many people, those spending cuts and any spending cuts now are really, really painful. And they also feel that it stalls up future problems in the economy by taking away investment.
Well, so look, there's another choice, which is raise taxes. So that's the choice of the government, is the balance between those two things. The problem they've got to address is that the borrowing plans are too high. So if she doesn't want to cut spending, she could come back and raise taxes. The problem is she said she's not going to do that again, and that makes it more politically difficult. So
how do you think the
from a market's point of view, I
react?
don't think they would mind between tax rises and spending cuts. They want the borrowing to come down.
Yeah.
And the Chancellor needs to kind of seize that.
And neither of those is an easy option, right?
Well,
let's be honest.
I think the tax option is much more difficult politically because she's just done one of the biggest tax-raising budgets and said we'll never have to do it again. I think the spending changes will be embarrassing, but it's probably a little bit easier to come back and tweak your spending envelope. I think it is a bit less credible because it's, basically make me good, but not yet.
Rachel Reeves is also going to China in the coming days. It's obviously a key partner for us in the economy, but there are human rights issues. Some people have got a lot of concerns about the Chinese government. Do you think she's right to build these links with China?
Well, I imagine that she is cursing the timing, first of all, because it's very difficult for her to pull out of this trip, but actually it's not going to be a great look if the market volatility is still going on. Look, we do need to engage with China. I do think it's a slightly strange strategy that the government has when we have President Trump about to arrive in the White House, and he is going to be putting incredible pressure on allies in Europe to get much tougher on China, particularly when it comes to technology, export controls, and all the things that he's extremely concerned about. For the British government now to be trying to mend links with China in the middle of all that controversy, I think is going to put them at odds with that and is going to make their negotiations with the US over things like tariffs even more difficult.
That's interesting. So if it's a choice between the US and China, then the US is the one we
Well,
should be...
it's a more important economic and strategic partner for us. And indeed, we share many of the strategic concerns that the US has about China.
Just finally, Liz Truss, she's written a letter to Keir Starmer, effectively threatening legal action and asking him to stop saying she crashed the economy. Is that a sensible move? I mean, I can't really imagine how this would play out in the courts, you know, like a debate about whether the Conservatives crashed the economy.
I mean, look, it's clearly not good for the Conservative Party to have Liz Truss back in the news. From her point of view, surely this is a case of if you're in a hole, stop digging. She should just disappear for a few years and hope that it goes away. But it's clearly not a sensible strategy. I don't know who is advising her that it is.
OK, thank you very much indeed.